tax cut for the rich and forget the poor. That's the way it goes. That's the way it's going to be. Trump's the biggest liar we've ever had, and Congress is worse than he is, and there's nobody to vote for. Thank you, John. Thank you, C-SPAN.
Cusack.
Congressional approval ratings are lower than Trump's, without a doubt. I mentioned transportation, and that is something that we've heard a lot of talk about, but we have not seen a lot of action from the Trump administration. Some people say, in retrospect, Trump should have started with transportation because that would have been
a big infrastructure bill, and
it would have attracted bipartisan support. And then, but can you do anything that big in an election year? Well, if it's good for the districts, but how are you going to pay for it? And he mentioned tolls, and that's definitely been part of the equation. How much is the package going to be, and will it be paid for? So tricky, and some people thought they would do tax reform and transportation.
That's what I said. One of those big deals that we thought was going to come together. Is that not happening?
That's not. No, we interviewed Steve Mnuchin, the Treasury Secretary, right as they were releasing their tax reform bill on the same day, the morning of, and he said, no, this is just going to be a tax reform bill. Now, Congress can do whatever it wants, but they are looking like they're just going to do taxes first. Whether they can reform the entire tax code, which is so difficult to do, hasn't been done since 1986. In a sweeping revamp of the tax code, because there's winners and losers and lobbying battles if you're closing so-called loopholes. But they could maybe cut taxes. And honestly, if Republicans can't pass some type of tax cut measure, it's going to be a big embarrassment for the GOP, which has not gotten a lot of its agenda through legislatively. You got Neil Gorsuch through, but they really need to get something done. And before they do that, they've got to pass a budget. Because if they want to use reconciliation and like health care, where they would not need any Democrats, well, they've got to first pass a budget for the new fiscal year. And that was supposed to be passed by now, has not been passed.
On tax reform, when does it start getting too close to the 2018 election to do that? What is the deadline, maybe not hard deadline, but what are the leaders of the House and Senate looking at?
Most Republicans you talk to say it's got to be done this year. It can't bleed into next year. So that means moving it, the Ways and Means Committee moving it sometime this fall, and then the Senate Finance Committee moving it subsequently that, and then coming together and passing a bill. But you've got to have the Republican Party united. They were not united, not enough to pass health care legislation in that dramatic vote that Senator John McCain voted no and took down the so-called skinny health care bill. So they've got to be more united, and that remains to be seen, especially when Trump is going after his own party.
For our radio listeners, I want to read to you what's on the screen, what our viewers can see. These are the September deadlines coming up. The 29th of September, the government hits its debt ceiling. The 30th of September, government funding runs out. Also on the 30th, CHIP funding, the Children's Health Insurance Program funding ends. The 30th as well, the National Flood Insurance Program expires. And also on the 30th, FAA authorization expires. That is a short list of some of the big deadlines coming up for Congress. We're talking about any and all of them this morning. Richard Butler, Kentucky, line for Republicans. Go ahead.
Yes, sir. Thank you for C-SPAN. You know, sir, I'm 70 years old. I was hearing from John F. Kennedy how he's going to help the middle class. All these presidents, everybody's going to help the middle class. But what happened was, just like Reagan, 3 million people were going to give amnesties to, which wound up being right around 12 to 15 million people, which really changed the culture of America. I remember when I was a child, I could go hitchhike and carry a gun on the bus to go places and do things. Now, our children are killing each other in the streets. Right now, immigration is the most important thing to me. Send them back. It's their government's responsibility to take care of these people. It's not my responsibility. My responsibility is two things. One, to take care of my wife, and two, to take care of my children. It's not to take care of every Mexican or Cuban or whoever wants to come across our borders. You have stacked the deck against Americans. If you watch the news, most of the people on the news today are political hacks who are put there by administrations. For instance, Joe and Danica. Huntsman's daughter on Fox News. We have no voice.
Got your point, Richard. We read a tweet earlier from Congresswoman Elena Ross-Latham saying that Congress needs to use this 6-month period that the administration is giving them to make the DACA program permanent. Can you talk about this debate inside the Republican Party, how much pushback there's going to be to ending this program?
Yes. Ros Layton, as you mentioned, she's retiring. And she comes from a district that Hillary Clinton won by, I think, about 20 points. She is one, I would bet, that voted for the DREAM Act. I'd have to look it up, but she was one of the few. You have this friction where you have a lot of hardliners who want to build a wall, who have said, push their leaders to say, listen, you need to get behind Trump. Trump did say that Mexico is going to pay for it, but he did campaign on this, and it was his #1 issue. And then you have others who are saying, well, listen, we can't end this program that President Obama started. We need to continue it. But people do believe that Congress is and should. There have been lawsuits about this, about whether Obama had the authority to do it, and whatever happens is there's going to be lawsuits because states were challenging President Obama, and that's why this decision was made, because there was a deadline on that this month, and I think it was actually today, and that's why we're seeing this announcement where the Trump administration had to decide whether it's going to appeal. So that's why it's forced this decision. And then if they end the program, well, then other states, more blue states, are gonna challenge this in court.
Andrew Cuomo, the mayor of New York, the governor of New York, with his tweet yesterday at noon, New York will not demonize diversity. We will not stand by as 42,000 New Yorkers are deported. If President Trump rescinds DACA, we will sue.
Yeah, and so regardless of what Congress does or doesn't do, this is going to be decided in one way or the other by the courts.
Mylan Burke on Twitter writes in this morning, Americans elected Trump to make the DACA decision, not to have him punt it to Congress. Does Congress want this football that Mylan describes as being punted to them?
I think it depends on who you ask. I think they've got so much to do, and you were reading the list, that this is just another thing. But sometimes when you have a lot of legislative things that you need to do, well, maybe you can trade. If you give me this, then I'll give you this. We just haven't seen that horse trading in recent years that's been successful. They've tried it, but certainly that is, you're going to see some Trump supporters saying, wait a minute, why is Trump backing down and yielding to Congress? He should just end it. That's why I voted for him. So he could get some backlash on it.
Do you think that's why Attorney General Jeff Sessions is making that announcement today? Well,
it's within his jurisdiction, and Trump was asked about it a lot late last week and said an announcement was forthcoming. We didn't know it was going to be over the weekend, and then now it's going to be today. Now, remember, the relationship between Jeff Sessions and Trump has been strained at times over his decision to recuse himself from the Russia investigation. So, but yeah, I think it's kind of a normal thing that you yield to the cabinet secretary who has jurisdiction over this issue.
The Attorney General will not be taking questions following his briefing today at 11 o'clock. Does that surprise you?
No, they want to control the message. They want to say what they want to say and their rationale, and it's unfortunate. As you know, I think they should all take questions on this. It's a big announcement.
As a good newspaper editor-in-chief will say.
Exactly. But I understand they want to control the message and don't want to answer what would be some very difficult questions.
Happening at 11 o'clock. We'll be showing it on C-SPAN this morning. Sue, Gaithersburg, Maryland, line for independence. Go ahead.
Yes, hi. I've been a Trump supporter since day one, and I've supported him, and I got out and voted for him, and I sent money, and I stood out on overpasses with signs for him. And if he does not end this program which he said was an illegally unconstitutional program, and send these people out of this country and stop making me responsible for it, I'm through with him. I'm done with him. If you have an unconstitutional, illegal program, you don't give the United States another 6 months to operate under an illegal program. And I never hear anyone talking about the parents who supposedly brought these people in through no fault of their own. When do they get deported? When do they get fined and criminally incarcerated for doing what they've done? This program is destroying this country and our ills in this country, economic, educational, criminal, health care. It's all related to this illegal immigration. And this Congress is going to tell me that I have to continue to suffer under Obamacare because they couldn't get their act together, but we're going to have a top priority for people who came into this country illegally, continue to stay here illegally, continue to commit crimes and cost me as a taxpayer here, my future and my children's future, I'm not going to tolerate it. It won't be the Democrats getting seats back next time. It'll be these rhinos that get primaried out by true conservatives, because we as the citizenry are not going to put up with this illegal stuff anymore. And President Trump, you better be listening to us citizens, because we stood out at these rallies for you. And if you continue this illegal program, we're done with you.
Bob Cusack, speaking to what you were just talking about.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's a big part of the reason Trump won the primary was because of immigration, and that's the playbook. It may change in future elections, we'll see, but go hard right on immigration. That's what Mitt Romney did in 2012. People forget that. And Trump went even further, especially with the wall, and it resonated with Republican voters, and they elected him, and now they want to see results, and they you know, some of them, clearly that caller doesn't like this punting to Congress.
About a half hour left with Bob Cusack this morning at the Hill newspaper. It's thehill.com, of course, to see all of their great reporting on everything that takes place in that building behind me and around Capitol Hill and around Washington as well. Tony is here in Washington, D.C., Republican. Go ahead.
Hi. Hi, good morning. Am I on?
Yes, Tony, go ahead.
Okay, yeah, I wasn't sure. Yeah, I would like to say, what better way to weaken a country than to bring foreign nationals into the country? I mean, you read in the Bible in 2 Kings, Josiah and Hezekiah, they ran the foreigners out of their countries because, you know, the idols they were worshiping and the love that they did not have for the country. They didn't have the heart for the country. Great Wall of China was built because to keep the foreigners out of the country. Look at China now. It's basically where America is now eating out of China's hand. And you know, I mean, these...
Tony, can I ask you a question real quick on that wall issue? Does it matter to you if the United States pays for that wall or if Mexico pays for that wall? Is that something that matters, or do you just want to see the wall built?
I would just like to see the walls built and these illegal people out of this country, because actually the Latinos, they just want their country back. And when they get a foothold as to where they can rule, they're going to do it. They're going to take over this country, and they're...
Got your point, Tony. Bob Cusack, let you respond.
Well, I mean, critics of immigration reform, comprehensive, the kind that President Obama was pushing, say that, listen, Democrats just want more votes. And the caller makes the point about foreign nationals. Well, foreign nationals can't donate to politicians, but if citizens can. So that's another political element here that a lot of Republicans talk to. Well, wait a minute, if we pass something, are we going to be losing elections moving forward? And that's why it's so difficult to get this done. I mean, it's just there's so many issues that, and, you know, the business community wants it. They want the Dreamers to stay. So a lot of different people are affected, and factions, corporations, and unions are affected by immigration reform. So everyone really has a stake in it.
Speaking of immigration reform, earlier in the summer, we spent a good deal of time talking about legal immigration and changes that the Trump administration is supporting, that legislation by Senator Cotton and Senator Perdue that they introduced at the beginning of this Congress. Where does that go? Does that get lost in this DACA fight?
You know, it'll come up, but at the same time, Democrats are very much opposed to that legislation, and that just does not. You need 60 votes on that kind of bill, and I think that could be something where Democrats say, listen, if you're going to put that in there, then we're going to walk away from the table. And that's these ultimatums where Democrats also are saying they're not going to support a dime of funding. But well, what if we extended this program? Would you then support wall funding? And, you know, that's going to be the rub. I still think that the progressive left is not going to allow Democrats to support wall funding no matter what, but we shall see.
Mike, Woodstock, Virginia, line for Democrats. Mike, go ahead.
Good morning, gentlemen, and thank you for taking my call. Thanks for C-SPAN. A couple comments. One, as a lifelong Democrat, I'm 62 years old. Both my parents came out of Shenandoah Valley from meager beginnings and did fairly well for themselves. Under 45's administration, deportations were at a higher rate than they are currently, and the illegal immigration rate has steadily decreased The majority of the 9/11 hijackers came across Canadian borders as far as immigration goes. Now, the one thing I did unbelievably agree with President Trump and his candidacy rhetoric was term limits on Congress. It's been commented on that Congress, in 30 years, as you stated earlier, 86 was the last sweeping immigration reform. So term limits on Congress, 2 terms for a senator, 12 years. That's 8 more than any president. 6 terms for a representative. That's 4 more years than any president. So all this talk about how that immigrants, particularly DACA people, have caused all these problems. There are problems, but there's criminals in every demographic. We know that. And there are many, many, many persons, whether they have immigrated legally or illegally, that embrace the opportunities in America. Many are good neighbors and good taxpayers. So this is a broad, complicated issue. But Congress, term limits and force the old adage of compromise. Makes me sick to hear left and right. We're Americans. I'm a moderate. The majority of Americans are in the middle and not on one far end or the other.
Hey, Mike, reminder to stick around for our 9 o'clock hour. We're going to be delving into some of those issues you bring up, the economic impact of that dreamer population, how many there are, where they live. We're going to be joined by Doris Meisner of the Migration Policy Institute. So we're going to be talking about a lot of those issues. But Bob Cusack, what do you want to pick up on?
A couple things. You mentioned deportations. At one point, groups on the left were criticizing President Obama and called him the deporter-in-chief. Yeah, and I remember interviewing Luis Gutierrez, who is a big proponent of immigration reform, and he was furious with President Obama. Now remember, Democrats had control of the House and Senate and the White House in 2009, 2010, but they were a little afraid of pushing immigration reform at that time. So the dynamic has dramatically shifted over the last several years.
To Michigan, Farwell, Michigan. Sue is an independent. Good morning.
Yes, my question to you is, I haven't heard much about the Democratic, I think his name is Melendez, his trial that's going on, and I hear Harry Reid is implicated in this now. Can you tell me how that's going to affect Congress?
It's a great question. The Menendez trial, I believe, starts tomorrow. Menendez is a Democrat from New Jersey accused of corruption and getting gifts in exchange for legislative favors. Menendez has said he is completely not guilty. However, he's going to have to be at that trial. He requested, because he's a senator, to be in Washington during the trial. The judge said, no, you're going to be at the trial. So that could factor in if there's some close votes this month, because Menendez is not going to be casting many votes, if any, this month. So that's going to be one to watch, and Democrats are a little concerned about that stealing headlines this month when Republicans are trying to move a lot of stuff. So that is something to watch over the next several weeks. And I know that the Republican National Committee has been putting out press releases saying, well, listen, if Menendez is convicted, he should step aside because Chris Christie would appoint, if he does step aside, his replacement. So that lot of politics possibly, but we shall see if he's convicted or not.
And of course, the Hill newspaper covering that trial as well. Looks like Max Greenwood, the reporter, has been covering that for the Hill. Richard, Wilmington, North Carolina, Republican. Go ahead.
Hey, good morning. I'm a combat disabled retired Air Force vet. And why are we continually going to go ahead and reward criminals, illegals, one word that nobody understands up there in D.C.? I mean, illegal. Deport them. Do not reward criminals. I, as a combat disabled vet, have been ripped off by the government $100,000 to pay my own disability, which they finally got concurrent receipts straightened out. I've never been paid back, nor any other vets, but yet we're going to keep paying criminals?
Yeah, this is something that you hear a lot of this, and that was why Trump was elected, is that he said he would.
We hear that from callers, that this is not a complicated issue. If it's an illegal immigrant, then That's the bottom line from them.
Right, and some people say, well, wait a minute, there's some people going through legal immigration, and these people are jumping ahead of them, and that's unfair. So that's another aspect that I'm sure you're hearing and going to hear from callers in the coming weeks and months.
To North Carolina, Lewisburg, North Carolina. Deborah, Democrat, good morning. Deborah, go ahead.
Oh. Yes, this is Deborah.
Go ahead, Deborah.
I just like to say, if there were so many criminals on the DACA program, yeah, they should be deported. But a lot of people down here, to make a better way, they're following the rules. And if you ask me, the biggest crook of them all is Donald Trump. Thank you.
All right, let's go to Paul in Lake Como, Pennsylvania. Republican. Paul, go ahead.
Yes, good morning, and thank you for taking my call. I believe that Mr. Trump should follow through on what he said he was going to do. Okay? I don't know just how it's going to happen, but I mean, they are illegals, and they've talked about the young people under 16 that were brought here, but they haven't talked about the parents. And the other thing is that all this time that's being spent on this program, I mean, it's just a lot of time wasted. I mean, people are just going to write about what happened today, but this country is in a situation right now where if we don't listen to what's going on as far as biblical, we're in trouble.
Hey, Paul, can I ask you? You said
listen, just a minute. We're in the third Earth age right now, and all the signs of the second coming of the Lord have started. Strife, fighting, brothers against brothers, sisters against brothers, families fighting, divorces, all kinds of stuff. And the last sign is the big one. It's wars and rumors of wars.
Got your point, Paul. Shirley, Newcastle, Pennsylvania. Republican, go ahead.
Thank you for taking my call, and I couldn't agree with the last gentleman more. Now, the thing is, you know, we wanted to get the Republicans in charge. So with Trump, we could get something done. Well, when you have people like Collins, Murkowski, and John McCain, and I understand he deserves a lot of credit, a lot of respect. I know he's very sick and he needs our prayers. But these three have really hurt the Republican Congress. So I really feel that those three need to be out and bring three new ones in that's going to work with the Republicans to get something done. Because look where we're at. Since January, what have they got done?
Well, yeah, I mean, the Republican Party made some big promises, and this is the first time in over a decade that they've had control of Congress and the White House, and it's been, without a doubt, they've been disappointed. They've not been able to get big things through, and the tax reform was supposed to have passed by now. So this is a crucial stretch for the Republican Party, who did not succeed on health care. It looks like that is not going to pass, because under the rules, under the reconciliation rules where you can pass health care reform just with the majority of senators, that expires at the end of this month too. So, and they're not really talking up on health care. There's actually more talk of bipartisanship now. The Health Committee is holding hearings this week of trying to fix it. But Obamacare, the Affordable Care Act, it's so polarizing. It's hard to see any type of bill passing Congress on that issue.
Collins, Murkowski, McCain becoming some of the leading players in the debate over the Affordable Care Act. Take us through your expectations for the DACA debate over the 6 months. The next 6 months, who are going to be sort of the leading senators to watch?
One thing on Collins is that she may run for governor, and that actually could open up the seat for Democrats. It's obviously a blue state in Maine. So that's something that Republicans want her to run for re-election. At least in Washington they do, because she usually easily wins. You know, the immigration debate, I think you're going to see members like Luis Gutierrez on the left. You're going to see Steve King, Republican from Iowa, who I know was tweeting over the weekend about this issue. So you're going to see hardliners versus the comprehensive reform people. And then you're going to Bob Goodlatte, who's the chairman of the House Judiciary Committee, as well as Senator Grassley, who's the chairman of the Senate Judiciary Committee. These are going to be the players to watch, what they see. Now, Grassley has struck deals with Democrats throughout his career, but will he be able to get some type of deal on this? It's going to be a tough task for Grassley.
I wonder if Jeff Flake is going to be a person you're going to be watching. Obviously, somebody that President Trump has had criticism for this past summer. We've seen it in tweets and comments.
Yes. And he's all but backed one of the primary opponents of Flake, Kelly Ward, who ran against McCain and really lost badly to McCain. But certainly Trump has not backed Flake and will not back Flake, and that's going to be a problem for his reelection in 2018. But Flake is a backer. Remember, like also President George W. Bush pushed comprehensive immigration reform. And it got real close to passing, but it just couldn't get over the hump.
I want to play Jeff Flake on CNN's State of the Union from Sunday. Was asked about the president going back on his promise among Republicans in places like Arizona. Here's that back and forth with Jeff Flake on Sunday.
Because it would be the right thing to do, to go back on a promise. Obviously, you hope that presidents keep some of their campaign promises, and you hope that they ignore others. This is one that he ought to ignore. There are 800,000 DACA kids who were brought across the border. The median age, I think, is 6 years old for those 800,000 when they came across the border. They should not be punished for the sins of their parents. That's just the basic principle that we ought to follow here. They are either in school or have graduated and are working. Almost all of them, I think 90-some% of them, are in the workforce. To remove them from the country, to split up families like this, is just not the way we ought to go.
So when the president tweets this morning, Congress, get ready to do your job, DACA. Is he talking to Jeff Flake?
Yeah, he's talking to Jeff Flake. He likes tweeting about Flake. The other interesting thing about Flake is that he is really close with the vice president. When Pence and Flake served in the House together before Pence became governor. So this is kind of an awkward situation for Pence. But without a doubt, and watch Flake. Flake is obviously running for re-election. He says he's totally devoted to running for re-election. But there's been a lot of speculation that he could run against Trump in 2020, and Flake has said that it's likely that Trump is going to get some type of primary challenger, and I think he's right. I think it's likely some prominent Republican will run against Trump. Not to say that candidate will beat Trump, but we've seen in the past the first Bush where Buchanan ran and weakened Bush #1, and some people say that cost him in the general.
One topic we haven't talked about in this segment yet is North Korea, what the White House is doing, what Congress is saying about North Korea. Here's the president from within the past minute on his Twitter page. We said we'd be watching his Twitter page this morning. I am allowing Japan and South Korea to buy a substantially increased amount of highly sophisticated military equipment from the United States. I'm assuming Congress would have a role in that purchasing agreement? Yeah,
I think they would. I mean, this is a very difficult situation, both for members and any administration. If it was an easy solution, it would have been thought of a while back. But the rhetoric, we've never seen this type of rhetoric get this heated between North Korea and the United States. Of course, the key player in this is China, and that's that the president has been pushing China to broker some type of a deal. But both Trump and North Korea, they are not backing down. But there has been talk of some type of military response from the United States. It's just hard to see how that doesn't devolve into complete chaos. And Steve Bannon said in an interview before he left the White House that there really is no military solution that is feasible.
Again, for viewers who missed it, yesterday there was an emergency meeting of the UN Security Council to talk about North Korea, that nuclear test from Sunday. You can watch it at cspan.org. It was a meeting in which U.S. Ambassador to the UN, Nikki Haley, said North Korea is begging for war with the U.S. Alan is in Little Rock, Arkansas. Line for Independence. Go ahead.
Hi, good morning, gentlemen. Well, I'll tell you, if this were required viewing for the folks in Congress today, it would be a withering thing for them to listen through and then show up.